Ohio State, guys, is this a hot or a valid take? They should be the current favorites to win the national championship next year. Right now, I looked up the odds during the break, and Georgia's currently the betting favorite, the odds on favorite at plus 300. Ohio State's right behind them at plus 500. Then you got your Texas, your Alabamas, your Oregons of the world. To me, they've done a lot of really good things in the transfer portal. We talked about Kyle McCord. I don't think anybody in Columbus is losing sleep over losing him, rightly or wrongly. We've talked about him ad nauseum on this show, but they go get Will Howard from Kansas State. They have all their weapons pretty much, other than Marvin Harrison Jr. coming back. They go get some awesome names out of the transfer portal. They just basically rated Alabama's top players over the last week or so. And they have an entire defense that's coming back for year 3 under Jim Knowles. So I don't know. This is a team that's making a lot of moves. I think they're really upset as a program that their rivals got a national championship. I think Ryan Day is still coaching with a chip on his shoulder, recruiting with a chip on his shoulder. It seems like they've got a lot of positive momentum on the off the field stuff, getting their NIL collectives together. What do you guys think from y'all's perspective? How is Ohio State doing? Would you pick them right now to win next year's national championship?
I think this truly does feel like, to me, the year that Ohio State might finally be able to get it done. And I want to hear you guys talk about the quarterback, the offense, because that's what a lot of people have focused. But guys, I've really planted my flag on the defensive block for Jim Knowles, riding for this defense. Guys, when Jim Knowles came over to Ohio State, this was a terrible Buckeyes defense. This was a Buckeyes defense that was struggling to get to the passer consistently. Their secondary was not very good outside of a key playmaker or two in the back end. But as a group, they were giving up a lot of yards. They were giving up points when it mattered most. And that's what Jim Knowles came in to fix. And I told you, I think at one of the very first episodes of this pod, I told you Jim Knowles is going to come in. He's going to revolutionize the defense. They're going to blitz galore. And that's what they've done. And the Buckeyes have gone from a defense that's a liability and one that holds them back from winning a championship to last year it was the quarterback play. It was consistent offense against the biggest teams, against the best teams that held them back, or at least made you question, okay, can this team really get it done? The defense is absolutely championship caliber with Caleb Downs and company coming over. I look at Ohio State and go, if not this next year, with all the weapons that they have and with a stone wall built up on defense, this may be their best chance.
Yeah, Mitch, you make a great point on all of that. My take for Ohio State last year was kind of right and wrong. I said that I didn't see where Ohio State was really getting better last year because everyone was projecting that McCord was going to be this amazing quarterback, and I said, well, quarterback play has never really been their problem, and so I was wrong on that one because that was their problem this year.
I mean, it
It was
was.
really just McCord being the thing, but man, what a jump in the defense, right? They went from being a liability, like you were saying, and then it got a little bit better year one. But this last year they were a top 3 defense behind. I think it was like any order of Michigan, Iowa, and them. There was some order in terms of scoring defense at the very top there by the end of the season. So when you talk to me about Ohio State and their defense, I'm saying, well, add Caleb Downs to that group and let's just lock and load, right? Let's keep it going. So I'm excited to see what that defense is going to look like. For me, I'm looking at this saying, okay, the step forward has to come from the quarterback spot, but also let's not ignore that you are losing one of the best receivers in college football in Maserati Marv, right? When you're losing him, you're going to take a step back in that room. I'm curious to see who steps up. They always seem stocked and loaded at the wide receiver position, and there's several talented guys that can still do that. I'm just curious to kind of see who steps up and becomes that alpha in that room, but none of that matters if they can't get quarterback play. I have a lot of reason to believe that they will, and that's where I'm going to kind of walk back some of the stuff I've said about Ohio State. It's a new season, right? It's the off season. I can start to change my opinions on stuff, and I got to walk some stuff back because
Clean slate, clean slate.
look, I'm a clean slate this thing, right? We're going to be objective here. Objectively speaking, and I have nothing against the Buckeyes personally, but objectively speaking, what they've done in the transfer portal is kind of terrifying, right? You were able to grab Will Howard, who I think is a seriously underrated quarterback. What he was able to do with Kansas State, slinging the football around. If they had better talent at the wide receiver position, I think Kansas State would have been a much more prolific offense these last couple of years. That aside, you're able to grab him. And oh, yeah, by the way, Julian Sands came over from Alabama. He was there for, a couple of weeks to move in and, get settled in and then deciding, what, maybe I don't want to play for not Nick Saban. Good call, kid. You're going to go play at Ohio State. And if you don't back up Will Howard for a year, it means you're starting, right? It means that he was good enough to win the starting job. And he sure is talented enough. We've seen, freshman quarterbacks do that before. If I was an Ohio State fan, I'd personally want Will Howard to be the guy right now because I'd want some experience coming back for me. But that's my own personal opinion. Maybe Ohio State fans disagree with me. Let me know in the comments. But there's that too. And then, Quinshon Judkins came over, and even before that had happened, Henderson had become a relative favorite in the Heisman odds. So when you're coming back with a true double-headed beast in the backfield with Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, plus the receivers that should be talented enough, plus better quarterback play, you're really starting to look pretty solid, and you're running out of reasons to say that Ohio State can't get it done. For me, Ohio State is the favorite at this point to win the whole thing. I don't see another roster out there that can rival what they have just in their starting, not even their two deep, but I don't see another roster that can rival this. And if I'm putting them up there and I'm looking at what they did defensively, if they can just keep that where it was and put a much better offensive product in the field, we could be talking one of the best college football teams of all time type of thing, just with the talent that they've accrued.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're building a monster in Columbus. And yeah, they either had the quarterback play and didn't have the defense, or had the defense and didn't have the quarterback play this year. It seems like they're going to have both next year. And guys, the schedule is kind of a joke for the new Big Ten. I don't think they're going to find a much easier schedule going forward in the new Big Ten. And I know, no disrespect to some of these teams I'm about to name off, but only 4 road games. 2 of those road games are really tricky. Penn State and Oregon. They do also travel to East Lansing. There's way too much up in the air for the Spartans next year for me to call that a very difficult road game on paper right now. The only other road game is to Northwestern. I think there'll probably be more Ohio State fans in Evanston than Northwestern fans.
Well, let's hope it's not too windy.
You're right. If it's windy, all bets are off. That's a call back to a couple years ago if you're new to the show. The 8 home games in Columbus. They don't play a Power 5 team out of conference, and they get Iowa. We'll see about their new offense. Nebraska, we'll see if they can put it all together. Purdue can be plucky. They've beaten the Buckeyes before, but it's been in West Lafayette. Indiana with a new coaching staff, and, of course, the Michigan game back at Ohio Stadium. To me, that's a schedule where if you're losing more than one, you're pretty disappointed.
I haven't seen it. Is there anything weird in the out of conference? Is there
it's Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. There's no
sick.
Power 5.
Yeah. So look, at this point, if you're looking at the schedule and the talent they have, they don't only have like an easy schedule, but it also seems like it's setting up so that they should be growing through the year. I think finishing any lower than the 2 seed, just because like maybe there's some, SEC bias with Georgia or something like that. Finishing any lower than the 2 seed, I think feels like failure for Ohio State.
There's only 2 games that I project to be back-to-back ranked teams right now in January. Obviously, a lot of stuff can change, but they play Iowa and at Oregon back-to-back. That's a really tough back-to-back, especially if Iowa beats them up a little bit.
Well, and they had a bad time, up in Eugene recently, that was in Columbus. No,
they lost it at home.
They have a rough time with Oregon recently, yeah.
And that is Ryan Day's only loss to not Michigan or a New Year's Six / college football playoff bowl in his whole career. That Oregon game is his only other loss.
Which is wild. Last thing on Iowa there. I know we talk about their defense and we're assuming that's going to be somewhat of a tough game, because Iowa still doesn't have an offensive coordinator.
Right. We
don't know. We don't know if we're running the Power I, if we're going to air it out. Like, nobody can tell you.
They're just waiting for one of these NFL teams to finish their season so they can officially announce it.
Speaking of offensive coordinators, one last thing on Ohio State. We didn't talk about it last week, but they did hire Bill O'Brien
They
as
did.
the offensive coordinator, which is
Interesting.
interesting to say the least. I think it does show that Ryan Day is wanting to be more of a CEO coach and hand over the reins to an experienced play caller. He's obviously called the plays before. I was texting with a good friend of the show, Joe from Longview, big Ohio State fan. I feel like that's a good move for him because I think in modern college football, there's just so much you have to juggle as a head coach that if you're trying to call plays on offense or defense, it's just going to be dang near impossible for you to keep it going. We've seen that just taper off more and more every year where the head coaches are giving up play calling duties just because there's too much else on their plate. I wonder what you guys think about that.
Totally agree. We've forced head coaches to be CEOs. We've forced programs to hire general managers. It's too much. It's too much for any one coach to do.
Yeah, I like the move to switch to it, but man, to go back and I can't let Ohio State fans completely off the hook. So let me take a quick little parting jab real quick. If you're wondering about a coach who might be on the hot seat and decides to give up play calling duties to an offensive mind of yesteryear, I'd like to point you to College Station and see how that worked last year for them. And just say, I hope that the results are better. Like, yeah, Jimbo recruited just fine at A&M. Ryan Day's doing a good job recruiting up there. I think it's a different situation. I expect big things. We just finished saying that. I'm just saying, like, let's not think that bringing in some guy who, maybe used to be a pretty good offensive mind, but hasn't really proved it as of late is a foolproof thing. I'm a little nervous about that. I still think Ohio State's talented enough to overcome that. But I'd just be a little bit cautious about, good Billy Bryan, right? I'd be a little bit cautious about him.
We saw what Bryce Young looked like without Bill O'Brien as his coach, so it wasn't as good as it was at
Yeah.
Alabama.
Yeah.
Poor Carolina Panthers fans. Y'all are wallowing in misery right now. We'll see. I'm not the biggest B.O.B. fan. I am the rapper, not
Big
not the
fan
play
of
caller.
B.O.B.
Not the play caller, but I just think at a certain point, it's like, man, there's too much talent in Columbus for one average play caller to screw it all up, right?
You would think so, but I guess if you're Bill O'Brien, this B.O.B., you're still hoping that you got the magic in you. So
Mm,
there you
There you
go.
go.
can't find a better way to close out the segment than that. That was perfect.
Gracious, how about that?